I don't think so.
Okay. We have, I guess, one thing that Lindsay and I were talking about earlier this week or last week, which is the patch strategy and effectively how we fix it or how we make changes to it. There's a couple changes we're going to need to make now. One is for merging lists and retaining ordering. Because things like environment variables, we support the strategic merge, which is like kind of synthetic map style of merging, but that loses the ordering. And so Manchi has is working on a design on how to keep at least relative ordering, so that the user to the user applying the config, it looks like the ordering remains consistent. But one challenge is that because of the way we support version skew between client and server, old clients will send old patch styles to new servers. New clients will send new patch styles to old servers. Both need to continue to function in a way that does not break anything. So the old client, if there's an old client or an old server involved, it should work the way it did if both are old. And the strategy we've been using so far is to incrementally add directives whenever we need to modify behavior. And so the new client will send what is effectively the old patch, or something that will be treated exactly the same as the old patch. So it doesn't have to be the same bytes, but the server needs to interpret it the same way. An old server would need to interpret it the same way. And then sending new directives that modify the behavior. And then because servers will drop directives they don't recognize, you'll retain the old behavior on the old server, and only new servers will pick up the new directives. And then the new server will get an old patch, won't get the new directives, and treat it the same as the old server would.
Will users see this as a breaking change?
No, that is that is why we're going through these lengths, so that they won't see it as a breaking change.
But I mean, if they script kube control and then do an upgrade, will they start getting new, different results from what they had before?
No, that's what we're trying to do. So the point is, we send a superset of what we sent before, and anything that the server doesn't recognize, so the new stuff in that superset gets dropped.
Right, but so I have a script running against old kube control and old server.
Mm-hmm. I
upgrade to new kube control, new server. I don't change my script. Different things happen.
Oh, I see. Yes, I mean, it depends. It's a case-by-case basis, but generally these are bugs.
Okay,
right?
I guess, yeah, there's that question of like, is this a bug, or is this something that somebody's going to be relying on? And it gets to that sort of root of the question of, are we bug for bug compatible?
Yeah. No. In some cases, the answer is definitely not. So like in the old case, it's like you'd get a random order. And now you don't get a random order, which is...
That seems like a clear win, yeah.
It doesn't break you any worse. It could have been that order. I think there's a couple others where most of the ones we've encountered is like clearly broken. But that is a good question.
It might be the type of thing where you bubble it up to the release notes in a way that's like, you know, technically we're changing behavior here, but we think we move from unpredictable to predictable. You know, yeah. There's a small chance that you might be relying on the unpredictable behavior, but like really it was just a matter of time before you got screwed anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, we try and do that with the release notes, but maybe it's worth calling out. I think we even have a kube control apply section for each release note now. all the things that we fixed.
Yeah, if we don't have it yet, we should, because, you know.
Because there's always like 3 issues at least.
Wow.
Anyway, some feedback we got from that was that the patch style becomes ugly and unwieldy because now you have to do maybe 2 or 3 directives to send a patch. And so they're kind of incoherent, and it's not obvious from a human constructing a patch. And I think that's just something we're going to have to live with until we decide to really rethink how we're doing the patch and versioning it or something like that.
Is this stuff documented well? I mean, so like, are we moving ourselves into a world where kube control and the Go client is the only thing that technically anybody could ever use because we haven't documented anything else?
No, it is not documented well. That is actually something that came out of Munchie's and my discussion. Is we're constructing a document, and that document, the intention is for that to contain background on patch, like what it's used for, all the directives and all the formats with examples and their motivation, and then a section on how we change the patch strategy going forward, which is
it sounds like a great doc.
Yes.
I wouldn't say great. It's not good nighttime reading, but it sounds like an incredibly useful doc.
Yeah. So we're thinking, I expect that to be done or at least out for review in the next 2 weeks or so. I'll send it to SIG CLI once we have it out. All right, I have one other thing probably worth discussing is using OpenAPI instead of Swagger. We have a bunch of tooling and libraries for using the Swagger format, which we get from the API server, but it's a lot more complicated to use because there's different documents for each group and version. And so there's a lot of libraries written around finding the right Swagger endpoint to pull from. And it doesn't contain as much information as the OpenAPI. Mehdi just added, or Munchie and Mehdi added the merge and patch keys to OpenAPI, which means we can now dynamically get them from the server. So we don't have to have compiled in types to figure out how to patch things, which is really good and it's really going to help with the version skew issues. It also means we can add arbitrary metadata pretty simply by adding a tag on the types.go, and then it appears in the OpenAPI. So if there's anything about a type, a Kubernetes type, that we think the schema should have, it's now trivial to add it and then get it in the client.
Yeah, I know that we already get the Swagger data on kubectl, but I was wondering, do we really use it for anything today? I don't think so, right?
Use it for client-side validation, which is not even the right way of doing things.
Okay, but just for that, right? Because, yeah, actually using metadata looks like, a good starting point for extensions. Not sure if you agree. Talking about get and describe, we were discussing a little bit about it yesterday, because you could, just mark, well, this column should appear in get in this third-party resource, something like that. So are you thinking about it in terms of the get and the describe being extensible? We have a
definitely
for it.
For Git, I definitely think that would be a just nice, easy win and not just for kube control Git. I kind of think of it as, what is the simple print version of this resource is something generally useful. If you're writing a Java client and you want to two-string a deployment, maybe you don't want to dump the whole YAML, right? You want to have a clear, just small two-string like we display in kube control. So having metadata to say, here's the simple way of printing this object seems like a easy win.
So I know, and I don't have all the details, but I know I heard Clayton at some point mention that some of this formatting for how we output stuff, moving some of that stuff server side.
Yeah.
I got to be honest, that kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies. I like the idea of providing more metadata in something like an OpenAPI or spec versus, hollowing out kube control and moving it all server side.
Yeah, I agree with that. I certainly think for 90% of the cases with Git, like just saying, here's the columns. We already support print these columns in kube control. Why not just attach it to the schema as a one-line comment and you're done? Makes more sense than trying to add complex business logic. For stuff like describe, it gets a little more challenging because right now, as describe's written, it's like if you describe a node, it reads all the pods and then it does like some analysis and summing of CPU and that sort of stuff. So I'm not sure what to do there.
But yeah, okay. But I mean, yeah, I still think describe is a little bit of a special snowflakes also, right? So I don't know. It's, yeah.
I agree. I guess my perspective is let's solve the easy answer first,
Yeah.
and then recognize that this doesn't necessarily solve some of the other problems.
Yeah, and I was thinking that we could think about in that process maybe to provide some tooling for cluster admins, because I'm not sure how easy or hard it is today for a cluster admin to set some of those flags, but metadata. But we could think about a admin kind of command to add flags, metadata to types or something like that.
Do you mean someone who doesn't, attach it to the type dynamically instead of
let's say you have a third-party resource, so how you actually tag your column to appear in GET, right? So I'm not sure, that's probably not part of the TPR descriptor, right? So we could think about providing some tooling for add metadata or anything like that, or even something more generic, but that cluster admins could use.
Well, one way we could go, and I'm interested in investigating more, is like Swagger can be generated for anything. And so for third-party resources, we could generate full Swagger that's compatible with everything that's compiled in. That includes schema, that allows you to do client-side validation of fields and types. That includes the print columns or anything else. And then you can throw that in an annotation or a first-class field, or we can decide how we want to attach it to the third-party resource, but then you get a lot more fidelity. Yeah, Joe.
So, I mean, there's a spectrum from sort of like, here's the preferred fields that are sort of intrinsic to the type versus here's user preferences, right? And sort of at the limit here, we're uploading user preferences for kube control to the server in some way. I could see these types of preferences being codified as, say, config maps. And maybe you have a cluster-wide config map that actually lays out the stuff, that the cluster admin has set up for this thing. And then maybe you have a per namespace or some way a per user config map that actually lets you store this. It seems like a little bit of an advanced case, but it seems like we're somewhere on that spectrum in terms of user preference type of stuff. It feels a little bit like, say, git ignore, right? So like, where it's like you can have your personal git ignore, you can have the repo git ignore, you can have, there's your personal in the repo that doesn't get checked in, git ignore. So there's like 3 or 4 different places where you pull these things from and merge it. So it feels like a preferences type of thing to me.
Yeah, if you're overriding the existing ones, for instance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it also came to my mind. We discussed these scenarios some time ago, groups, right? So for example, I would like in this cluster that this third-party resource of mine to be part of the all group, so that every time I do kubectl get all or delete all, that resource is included. So somehow, that could be, a cluster-wide preference, so that cluster admins, tag it as a part of the all group. But I could also have maybe some my own preferences. So when I deal with, all, include this third-party resource.
It sounds like a fun feature that we'll never get to.
Yeah.
But 5 to 10 years.
We'll get to it eventually, right?
Kubernetes 3.0.
Yeah, but the cluster-wide part of it, I think that's feasible, right? Because we discussed that in past already. Being able to be flexible about what's included in groups like all. So maybe in a cluster-wide, scope, we could think about it. Maybe not that hard, but as I said, we should probably have some tooling around it so that cluster admins could easily tag, this third-party research is part of all now. So just include a metadata to this EPR. Anyway.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
So one of the things that we did in 1.6 for kubeadmin was we introduced a new namespace called kubepublic, with the idea is it's a place where you can put stuff like config maps where you want to publish it, and it's not sensitive information anyway. So that might be an appropriate place to put data like this.
And I think, Fabiano, what you were talking about was less like individual users saying, I want kube control to behave in X way, and more like, how do we make sure third-party resources have all the same hooks as the rest?
Yeah, makes sense.
One thing actually might be interesting, like that could potentially be done as an extension if we have the right extension points in kube control. So like, I guess we'd have to think more about this, and this would go into the plugins kind of thought, but like you could create a third-party resource or aggregated resource that's like kube control preferences. And then if there's the right hooks in kube control, like it can get the flags from there or something like that.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like bash completion.
Yeah.
Or command line completion.
So Joe, do you got anything on mind you'd like to discuss?
Well, I think I'm mostly just auditing this class, so like, ignore me. I can't keep my mouth shut, but like, feel free to ignore me. I mean, the one thing that I was looking for is that as we finish up 1.6 and head towards 1.7, there's a lot of push to get more formal about features and actually making sure that we get this stuff published. And so one of the things that we did in Cluster Lifecycle is that we started a doc of here's all the things we'd like to do, here's the things that folks have signed up for in 1.7, and then helped facilitate the people who signed up there to actually do the right feature process and get the design docs done. And so then it ends up being a little bit of a living document in terms of a backlog of ideas along with the stuff that is in scope for 1.7. I can share that with you if you want to sort of see sort of the form that we took there. And so we've been working, on this stuff for like the last couple of sessions. And I'm just wondering if you folks have anything like that going on.
We have a couple of roadmaps pivoted or we have two roadmaps pivoted in two different ways. So that might be similar, or it might be something we could turn into what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's just the type of thing where it's like, it's a touchstone where you can review throughout the cycle of like, okay, how are we doing on this? Do we have the feature repo? Is there a design doc? And it sort of becomes an ongoing agenda item for us. So I'm not sure how you want to work it, but I'd love to see sort of, what's on the plate for 1.7 around this stuff.
Yeah, let me post in two links now.
Yeah, we have these two documents. One is more like a roadmap for the year, and the other is for individual releases. But I think that's something we're not doing. Something like you, Joe, mentioned. Updating that doc with the status and where is the proposal and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, that sounds like actually a good idea, because we planned and didn't touch the documents after that. So
believe me, like it's so easy to do that. Yeah. It just, there's indications that from the sort of process planning and release management side that each release we're going to lock down further and further the fact that, oh, I'm sorry, you didn't have you didn't go through the feature process here. Like, we really need to find the right ways to communicate this stuff. And so making sure that this stuff is well known and communicated and get out in front of it, I think is going to be helpful.
Okay,
I'm sending things to the wrong people here. Like I don't know how to use this thing. All right, everyone, there we go. Pull up in the cluster lifecycle one.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we have the answer here. Just like it's like an idea.
Yeah, this is definitely focused on a release instead of multiple releases.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple things also. Sorry, Joe. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, please.
I have a couple things. Three actually. First one is well, some time ago we wrote this kind of onboarding process for people that would like to contribute to kubectl. So that's a document in the community repo. But I wanted to confirm with you guys if we publish that in the public mailing list or anything like that. If we didn't do that yet, I think that would be a nice idea, as a call to contributors. So anyone that would like to contribute to kubectl, so here's our onboarding document, and here's where you could get started. I don't think we did that right.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we sent it out to the. Are you talking about Kubernetes Dev or?
Yeah,
I don't remember, but we could probably do it again if we hadn't.
Yeah, I'll do that then, and make sure that maybe we get a couple more people to help, because we are really in the need, especially for people to help review pull requests and things like that. So anyway, I'll do a kind of call to action for people in KubeDev. The second thing I have actually, you mentioned a little bit about it, kubectl plugins. So I wanted to mention what's the status around it. So I have the pull request for V0 of plugins, which already got 2 rounds of reviews, and I just this morning addressed the last comments from these 2 reviews. So we are pretty close. Let me actually send the link.
Is there a feature issue for that?
Yes, there is. There is a feature issue and also a written proposal.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and that's the link for the pull request. So that's V0. So the first round of support for kubectl plugins. That's basically binary extensions and no support to a proxy to the API or anything like that. But when I started playing, writing the pull request and actually writing a couple example plugins, I realized that it's already pretty powerful. So if you guys want to provide any feedback and help in reviewing, it's a pretty big one, but we're pretty excited about it. So yeah, and to see what people will come up with once we have it. But anyway, that's V0, so not GA. We are planning to probably add some kind of alpha or beta process around it. Anyway, so that's plugins, and I guess that's what I had.
Cool. I really look forward to seeing that stuff. Especially when
as you started to implement it, has it drifted from the design doc, or has reality and design actually stayed close?
It drifted a little bit, especially because the design doc is not very much detailed about things like, for example, the searching process. So where kubectl will search for plugins, so this kind of details. So I'm planning, once we are pretty close to getting it merged, to work on the to update the design doc, and actually that will spin up a kind of document for people that want to start playing around with it, writing some things, writing some plugins, things like that. So something similar to the Helm document that they have in their GitHub repo. But the basic idea is already in the proposal, but details are not there yet. So I'll make sure I update it.
Yeah, I think so I'm really excited about that, and I totally am on board with this. Like, let's get something out there that people can give us feedback on as soon as possible. And I think things that we may want to consider as the next steps would be, one is, I do think we just want some porcelain around how to install a plugin and make sure it's simple. And I'm not talking about a registry, but instead of like having users know where the path is and dropping it on there and downloading it and all this stuff, having a simple command. I think we talked about that briefly. And the other thing I thought we probably want to do, and this aligns really well with Jeff's work around starting to split out the repo, is there's utilities like getting the Swagger spec, which is going to be deprecated, but like getting the Open API spec and parsing it, and traversing all the files that, like the visitor pattern we use for taking the -f flag and working through the files and directory and all this sort of stuff. If we could split it out into something that could easily be vendored and then provide small documents around how that stuff works, we might be able to help people write plugins more simply.
Yeah, actually, some time ago, I did kind of a proof of concept. So I wanted to, create a kubectl repo in my own GitHub account and just import the CMD kubectl package and generate Go depths so that we could have an idea about everything that kubectl is importing today, and especially things it should not be using. So things from things that are not in the client Go or the API machinery repos, but in the Kubernetes repo, and kubectl should not be using. So I did that exercise some time ago, and we have, I think one of the tricky ones is going to be the generated internal client set, because we are just importing everything, that's under the main repo under internal client set, the generated one. So basically, the client parts of it. So there are a few pieces. Some of them are not going to be too hard, like utilities, things that we import from the main repo. And I even don't see too much problem in us using that, but the API client, the parts that are in the main repo, not in the client Go or the API machinery repos, are going to be a little tricky.
Yeah, I totally agree. Jeff wrote a list of every import statement, or sorry, for every, I think it's every package imported that comes from main Kubernetes outside of kube control, and it was like a ream of papers. But I think the internal types were about half of them.
Yeah, I'll actually paste the link here. So that's the generated Go depths based on a repo that only has CMD kubectl, a copy from the CMD kubectl package from the main repo. So I just generated the Go depths, and that's basically all that the kubectl command import. So yeah, there are definitely some things that should not be there. And anyway, but I think moving on, it's going to be nice to have kubectl on its own repo.
Hey, you guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi, this is Jeff. I've been listening for about the last 2 minutes. I'm on a phone, so I can't do video. One couple of comments. One, Fabiano, did you send out you sent out more information, some fixes on that PR for the plugins?
Yeah, right? I did actually, like half an hour ago. I pushed a new version. I just have a couple of adjustments to do to my examples, but after that I'll call for another round of reviews from you and Matej, I think.
Oh, great! Thanks. Thanks.
Yeah.
I just tried to pull it up. I'll look forward to that. And also, with respect to the kubectl extraction, yeah, it's going to be tricky. We're putting together a document to describe what we're going to do and why we're going to do it, and we'll send that out hopefully this week. But yeah, there's a lot of dependencies that need to be broken. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I think this is one of the more challenging tasks that we've had to do in kube control. But I'm excited about it.
I'm excited to see kube control do it, because then we can do the same thing for things like kubeadmin. So
I hope yours will be easier. I suspect it will be.
I think we're going to be easier, but there's still all the machinations around sort of the release processes, which is in test, which is very tied to the monorepo.
Yes,
that's pretty much the key problem to solve, really. How the tests are going to work, how the release is going to be managed, etc.
Yeah, I mean, we can, depending on the stages, as long as it lives in staging, the answers to those questions are easy. And it's mainly just about dependencies. But yes, once we move out and fully manage it separately, those become big questions. And actually, one thing I'm hoping that we're able to make progress on either this release or next release is better visibility into whether we think we're green for release. I feel like during the release process, it seems like everyone maybe kind of thinks they are, but then the release team thinks maybe they're not. And it's not clear that every SIG or sub-team understands exactly what their health is with respect to cutting a release. I know that I don't think we have great visibility into that. I don't know that the version skew tests are running right now. And if they are, I don't know where they're running. And
yeah, they're running now, or at least they was in the 1.6 release process. I know because I fixed a couple failures on skill tests, but they were running at least. I suppose they are running now.
Oh, is that at the test grid? That stuff's there?
I'm not sure. I'd have to check, but yeah, I think it's part of the test grid now. But at least it was on 1.6.
Okay, I see 1.5.1.6. I just don't see 1.6 master. But there's these, and then I know there's two control tests, but I think get mixed in with the other test jobs, because right now the grids are set up by job, and the job just has all of the tests for many different SIGs. And so there's a lot of noise in there, which means I don't look at it.
So the biggest chunk of work in the kubectl extraction is going to be setting up the integration tests. It's not really the dependencies. I mean, dependencies breaking is going to be pretty straightforward. There's some work to do, but it's relatively straightforward. It's setting up integration tests that will support having the option to push kubectl more frequently than the rest of the core. So that's going to mean skew tests are going to become sort of not an abnormal thing. They're going to become a normal thing. Kubectl won't necessarily ever release at the same time as the rest of the core. And that means skew becomes the new normal, so the integration tests are going to have to reflect that.
Is that the plan, to actually have a separate release cadence for kubectl?
One of the reasons to split the repository is to allow that to be an option.
That seems like maybe step 3.
Right. It's not like an immediate thing. It's just it's an end goal that you could choose to do that if you wanted to.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons also for splitting the kubectl is allowing it to be kind of used as a library. So we want, for example, to have less dependency on Cobra for the core parts of it, and allow some parts of it to be used by other Go programs. So that's one of the ideas also.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. There's a number of different possible wins here, or things we should be thinking about. One is, how do other folks build CLIs or tools to work with Kubernetes? What infrastructure is available to them? Do they have to do it from scratch? And so we want to help facilitate that. So the kube control as libraries and infrastructure. And then the command piece, which is how do we write a client that people use, like Jeff was saying, that's really decoupled from Kubernetes, the server side piece anyway. And then there's as a platform, which is the plugins piece. How do we allow folks to discover and install new functionality for working with the cluster? All right, well, that's all I have. Are there any other topics anyone would like to discuss?
Nothing else from me.
Yeah, I think I found the school test and I sent it in the chat. It's running in the release 1.6. It's 1.6 against the master. Yes.
Oh, I see. They're both here in the same one. 1.6 and 1.5 are in the same test grid.
Yes. I thought you are asking about the latest version against 1.6, right? So I have sent the one. I guess it should be.
Yeah, I really think we need a way of summarizing this. Like, look how many links there are on this page. Like, how are we supposed to figure out what our health is? Like, by clicking through all these links? That makes no sense. Maybe we can figure out if there's any infrastructure that allows us to publish just which tests are failing to a single dashboard that we can look at. But thanks for posting that link and identifying that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and I'll see y'all in a couple weeks.
Thank you, guys. Bye.